Hi everyone, Scott here from NAMC. I just wanted to do, I've already done a walk around video on the NAMC Mig-35, and today I just wanted to touch more on sort of some little build tips maybe, and also some setup techniques. You know, we very much appreciate it. We've already got some people that have bought the plans to the Mig-35 and they're building away, so hopefully this will be in time for some folks, and just give you some ideas. You know, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to build their plane. Everybody has their favorite setup, but some lessons learned that we've found along the way to get yourself set up for the best CG and balance for at least for your maiden flight. So I'll just run over some of that stuff. So just real quick, nothing real fancy about this build compared to most of my other builds. I did experiment with this, a new glue product, this foam cure that I got from, this is actually from Hobby King. It's made by Bob Smith Industries and is available in the US, I think at Heads Up Hobby. I think it's about $5 for this bottle for 4 ounces. They tell you on the website that it doesn't dry flexible enough to be used for hinges, and I totally agree. If you were just going to use the glue for a hinge, it's not good for that application. But you know, a lot of people now I know like to use. You're probably not going to be able to see it here, but I've got that fiberglass mesh drywall tape. This this stuff right here. You know, that's sticky on one side. I'm using that for all my hinges and a lot of my internal reinforcement. So because this is acting as the hinge material, you know, the glue doesn't really need to hinge. When it all completely sets up, it actually sets up about the consistency probably of epoxy. So it dries up you know, pretty stiff and solid. So if you want you know, more flexibility, then you might be better off with, you know, hot glue or foam tack or whatever. Weight wise, actually it dries quite light. I've compared between one plane built completely with foam tack and this plane which was built you know, other than a little bit of epoxy and a dab of hot glue here and there. This plane was built completely with foam cure, and it ended up only being, I think, about 3 grams or 5 grams heavier. So pretty darn close, you know. I mean, I might have got a little bit slap happy with the glue, so who knows. But you know, like places in the nose, it dries. You know, it's nice and solid. You know, there's no flex, which, you know, may be good or bad depending on what you like. It's also sandable. Like once it's dry, like if you let it set up, that, you know, on the bottle it recommends letting it completely set up for a good 12 hours. And you can actually, when I finish my planes, what I like to do is take a knife like this with the big long blade, and then, you know, sort of shave down all those corners on the score lines. And if there's you know, if you got a couple of beads of glue or whatever, the knife will actually slice through it nice and clean. The glue doesn't catch on the blade, and then you can actually sand it. It'll sand. There's a little bit of resistance to the sandpaper, but it'll allow you to sand smooth. Like it doesn't catch on the sandpaper, maybe like hot glue or other flexible glues. So yeah, so we're going to give it a try and see what sort of durability. It's you know, it's certainly tough to beat the price, $5 for 4 ounces. So we'll see how that goes. So anyway, like I said in my walk around video, my build is Depron. Stefan actually does sort of combo or hybrid builds, depending on what you want to call it. He likes to use MPF for his fuselages. He finds it easier to shape and to sand. So someday I've got about a dozen sheets of Depron right now, so someday I need to pick up some MPF myself or MPF equivalent and try that for the fuselage. Paperless dollar store foam for my KFs. The paint job is just acrylic craft paint you get at, you know, dollar store, craft store, Walmart, depending on where you are. Really cheap. I just brush it on. I think I might have talked in other maybe my other videos. What I've been doing lately to lighten up the plane is I mix it with, this is like a 50% water and alcohol mixture that I just get at the buck store. I think the bottle of this is like 15 ounces for $1.25 or whatever. And I use this in a squirt bottle to take the paper off the dollar store foam. So what I do is I just mix a little bit of this. I use these little plastic cups for my paint. Pour a little paint in there, pour a little bit of this in there to water it down, you know, give it a good stir till it's about the consistency, maybe a little thicker than, you know, sort of coffee cream or whatever. And I've been noticing that it lightens my planes up quite a bit, because I used to, just without thinning that paint down, my paint jobs were adding at least a good ounce to my plane. So by doing that, I'm saving about ½ an ounce almost, you know, and once it's up in the air, the paint looks a little thin maybe in spots when it's sitting on the table, but once it's up in the air, it looks just fine. And if I can save ½ an ounce and, you know, plus save myself some paint in the long run, it's worth it. I just want to point this out. You'll notice, hopefully you'll be able to see here. Get this lamp out of the way so I don't gonk it. Stefan and I have been like to symmetrically sand, shape and sand all of our leading edges and our trailing edges. It's a bit fussy, and you know, it takes some time and a couple of sheets of sandpaper. But in testing, when I built some of the early prototypes of the Mig-35, you know, I just put them together. I didn't sand them. I just you know, put them together with hot glue, and away we went. And you know, I could feel that the plane was you know, draggy. It was sort of like, you know, the motor could give me a lot more, but I just would sort of hit the drag limit. What I found comparing one plane to another is, you know, the extra hour or so fussing around sanding it, you probably get, in speed, you probably get about 6 to 8 extra miles per hour. If speed is not really important to you, that's fine. But if, you know, what that says to me is, if I can get, my plane can go that much faster with the same motor, then you know, just flying around, cruising around, I should be more efficient, and you know, maybe have longer flights. And the plane also just feels a bit more slippery through the air. And normally a good sanding job, I found, has saved me, probably reduces the weight of the plane by ½ to ¾ of an ounce in total over a plane that's not completely sanded. So anyway, you might not want to do that for extra points, but I've actually built this with hot glue, you know, using hot glue really sparingly. You know, if you don't have access to foam cure or foam tack or Yoo-hoo or some of those glues, what I do is, I learned this tip probably from flight test actually, is I always keep a box of extra little chunks of foam when I build. And all I do is, you know, when I was building with the hot glue, I scraped off as much of the excess hot glue and drove it down into the seam. So I probably used, I would say I probably used about 5, 6 maybe of those little mini glue sticks, but I probably scraped off at least ½ a glue stick. So let's say I probably added, I don't know, 25, probably an ounce, you know, on just a basic build with elevons only, and it held together pretty well. So you can still build with hot glue. Again, you know, always better to build as light as you can. Gives you more versatility down the road. So, all right, I'll talk quickly just about one of my other finishing techniques. Stefan actually likes to fill, you know, like imagine here when you've built this, now you've got, you know, sort of 2 square edges where the 2 pieces meet together. Stefan actually likes to fill with scrap foam and foam cure and then sand that down. So what I've done is I've gone back to an old technique that I used to use and use lightweight filler, but what I used to do before was I didn't shave it down first, I just glopped on all the spackle and then sanded it, and that just added a ton of weight to my plane. So now what I do, like I mentioned before, is I just take a blade like this with a nice sharp blade in it. You can buy these, I buy these blades, you can buy them for real cheap through Hobby King, dollar store, places like that, you know, because you want to keep them good and sharp. And then just holding it at an angle, I just sort of slide it along and, you know, shave off those square corners, you know, until I get it down sort of to where I want. And then what happens is the little gap along in here now is much smaller. And then I take, this is DAP Fast and Final. It's like the lightest weight filler you can buy. It's actually sort of the consistency of, you know, like a chocolate mousse, like a really kind of light and fluffy. So I put that in down into those little slot grooves that are left behind, and then sand it off. And I basically only do sort of the nose forward. That's, you know, to keep it nice and aerodynamic, the nose and the canopy here. And I've found out, because I'm adding so little, that it really doesn't add any weight at all to my plane, but it makes it look nice, and probably helps it make a, you know, cheat the old drag monster a little bit more. So that's been working out well for me on the last few builds. I just wanted to point something out. If you do choose to sand your plane, these little unique little dog tooth things on the elevons here. One of my earliest builds, I had sanded it down so it's down to a nice point, and I sort of ended up inadvertently going into the long grass, and the long grass just sort of mushed this down, and because the foam is quite thin here after I symmetrically sanded it, and so it didn't look very good, and it was kind of hard to get it shaped back again. So what I've been doing with the last several builds is I mix up a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, and then I take it and I just lay it down and then just scrape it down nice and smooth, scrape off as much as possible on top and bottom, before I painted the plane along here, and then just let it really set up well. So it's not going to keep it from breaking, but if it does break, it should break clean, and then you can glue it back on again without it being just mushed up foam. Anyway, just like I say, just something I've learned along the way that might help you out if you're looking to keep those a little bit more durable. These little tiny things are the things that always get banged up in the car and stuff like that. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the setup. I've got all my servos in the recommended holes per the plans, and so I've got elevon servo here, aileron servo here. So I've actually got the servo oriented, so the servo wire is on this end of the elevon servo and on this end of the aileron servo. So they're actually sort of running towards each other. If you put the servo the other way, then your wire is going to be awfully close to the prop slot here. So orienting your servo so that the wire is this way, it makes it a lot easier. And then the wire going that way on the the aileron servo. And then for the rudder servos, again, I put it so that your rudder servo is actually coming down into the nacelle between your elevon servos right here, your aileron servos right here. So I put the wire again facing forward so that it doesn't, it has less distance to travel. And then hopefully you can see down the intake there where the 3 wires are, and then I just pull them snug in through the into the electronics bay here. So I'm going to get the speed controller and my receiver out of the way here, so hopefully you can see some of this stuff. So I'm going to just use this push rod here as a teaching aid. So you can see I've pulled all these wires, the 3 wires, that all the 3 servos on the left side and on the right side. And what I do is, in order to keep them nice and snug, is I just take a little mini zap strap or zip tie that I buy at the dollar store, and just sort of pull them tight, get the thing looped around, and then just sort of slide it down like you're cinching up a bolo tie or something, I guess. And then that helps keep those wires fairly taut in the intake, and it helps keep them clean and back here out of the way. You'll notice here, I'm just going to point this out. If you pretty much, no matter how light your battery is going to be, unless you go with a super, I think the lightest battery I flew with this in testing was about a 16 or 1800 milliamp battery. If you were going to go build one super light, then with maybe a 1300 milliamp, then maybe your battery might not go all the way to the back. But all the batteries that I've used in testing, and I showed this in the walk around as well, this is a fairly heavyweight 2200 40C 3-cell. That's pretty heavy. And this is a lighter weight 2200 3-cell 25C. which is about an ounce lighter than this. And then this is an 1800, which is about another ounce lighter than this yellow battery here. All of them end up being right back up, pretty much right up against the motor mount, or maybe a quarter of an inch ahead up, you know, because you've got this wire bundle here in the way. So when you're putting in your Velcro, you know, you don't need to run your Velcro all the way up to the bulkhead or anything like that. I've just got, I think my Velcro in the bottom here to hold my battery is maybe an inch longer than my battery. So you don't need a lot of Velcro in there for your battery. So Stefan and I use these batteries a lot. They're Zippy Flight Max 2200 40C, like I said. These are a really good versatile battery for us because I can use these. It's probably overkill. This is a 2212 2700 kV motor. Most of them, the highest I've ever seen them pull amp wise is or the focal price. You hear people call it the focal price. This one's actually from Deal Extreme, but it's the exact same motor. So they pull, maybe I've seen the highest I've ever seen them pull is maybe about 37 amps on a 6x3 EMP prop. So this is like probably way overkill. But it gives you, in the wind, I like having a little bit of extra weight. I find it helps keep me, gives me a little bit more, pardon me, stability and penetration, wind penetration, sorry. What you will find if you use a heavy battery like this, or what I have found, is even with the battery all the way to the back, I'll just show you here. So all the way to the back, and then what I do is I put my speed controller ends up being sort of right there in the back as well. The plane will still might feel just a tiny bit nose heavy, like just on the verge of being nose heavy. So sometimes I'll have to put 1 or 2 clicks of up trim in there. So by starting off, if you've got lighter 2200 batteries like this, or 1800, 1600, if you're running this motor, or let's say you're running like the Turnigy 2826 2200 kV motor, the one that's on the RC Power's master parts list, 1800 milliamp battery, you're going to get 5 to 6 minutes flying time, depending on on how aggressive you like to fly. And then again, it'll be right up against the back of the electronics bay. And then, as I mentioned in my walk around video, and you can put your speed controller and your receiver on whatever side you want. This is this is just the way I've sort of traditionally done it. I normally like to have my speed controller on the right because it's a little bit heavier than the receiver, and it helps a little bit counter torque roll. So you can do it whichever way you want. But as I mentioned in the walk around, I like to put a strip of Velcro along here, and then what I've been doing is I've actually been laying, because when I get it to really far back here, if I try and, oops, oh, Velcro just came off. If I try and orient it, if I try and orient it like that, then obviously it sits up too high, and I can't get my electronics bay hatch closed. So what I've been doing is setting it, sort of on its side like that, and then it works out well. Now, if you're worried, that on this one, this Turnigy Plush, the heat sink is sort of on the top. If you're worried about, too much heat transfer between your battery, I've just been tucking. This is just a little scrap piece of 3mm Dupron. You can just sort of tuck that in there like that, and then that'll, it's supposed to be insulation, so hopefully that'll prevent a little bit of heat transfer. I mean, it's, you're only up there for 5 or 6 minutes flying, unless you're flying in like 40 degrees Celsius, 110 degree Fahrenheit or whatever temperatures. Things shouldn't run that hot, on a 5 or 6 minute flight. I have to get a new piece of Velcro on my speed controller here. Okay, so what that allows you to do then is, like I said, when I fly this plane with this battery, I've got my speed controller sort of all the way back there, and then I'm balanced. The CG is right here, sort of right, almost directly in line. It's actually directly in line with the hole on the plans that you would cut to accept the rudder servo in the wing plate. Now I've actually countersunk my my rudder servo. So what I've done is you know, I've just put my rudder servo and then traced around it and then just cut a little bit of a relief out of the dollar store foam and then just pushed it down so it's, you know, it's not sitting up quite as high. So this plane right now balances right on the CG that way. Although, like I said, with this big battery, I do find it's just a touch nose heavy, so you know, I might have to have 1 or 2 clicks of nose trim, up trim to keep the nose from wanting to dive on me too much. Okay, so I think that's it. So like I said, my receiver is not that wide, as you can see. This is a 6-channel receiver from Hobby King, which is compatible with my my Turnigy 9X with ER9X flashed on it. So I run my my 2 rudder servos, pardon me, are just run into one single channel using a Y harness, and then all of my other servos have their own individual channel, which is kind of nice because in the ER9X, and I'm sure you know people that have Taranis and some of the more advanced FR Sky, other types of radios, it allows you then to sort of fine-tune each one of your servos individually, and I guess probably more advanced Spectrum radios like the DX8 and higher probably can do the same thing. I'm not that familiar with those, but anyway, that gives you a little bit of flexibility. So you can, you know, it is kind of, for me, it is kind of a bit snug. So if your receiver maybe is a bit bigger than mine, depending on where you decide to put it. Now, what I should have said earlier is, I find it's important to have my receiver back pretty far, and then I sort of tuck my, you know, I keep my wire bundle here. Once I get all of this mess all organized, I zap strap it together and then just sort of tuck it in there. And then, you know, you've got this chunk of, you know, I don't know, maybe I might be causing myself RF problems. I'm not really sure, but you know, I've got a piece of Depron in here in between my motor wires, my ESC wires, and all of this sort of stuff. And touch wood, you know, I haven't 400 plus flights. I haven't had any problems with any of that stuff kicking out on me. So you know, because here's your center of gravity, and you know, one of the things that we designed this plane is to try and concentrate things as close to the center of gravity as possible to really make it perform its best. So you know, if your receiver's a little bit bigger, you know, you don't, like I said, if you're using this motor or maybe the Turnigy 2826, then you know, you don't need a big honking 40C battery in there, you know, unless you want to add an extra ounce or so if you're in windy conditions or whatever. So use a smaller 2200 or an 1800, you know, because it'll be easier to tuck in underneath there and get it back up against the motor mount. So anyway, hopefully that's helped you with the setup tips there. This has worked out really well for me, and as I said in the walk around, I like having this Velcro. It gets a little, you know, it does get a little snug in here, but having the Velcro on the speed controller and up in here, I can move it back and forth to fine tune my balance, my CG, depending on which battery I use. And then I just, you know, when I'm taking the battery out, I just pull my speed controller out of the way, pop the battery out of there, you know, then I'm ready for another battery. And I've been finding that the plane flies, you know, this was sort of inspiration when Dave Powers did that battery booster seat sort of video. I now try and put my battery right on the dead center line. That now requires sometimes that I do have to put a few clicks of trim in the roll, but I'm fine with that because I find that the plane flies much more balanced, especially if if you're getting slow. Prior, about 90% of my planes, I always used to jam the battery over all the way to the right hand side, and what I find sometimes with planes when they get slow, you know, you get in a right turn and sometimes it'll want to do like a tip stall or dive to the right because you've got all that weight to the right of the center line. So by sticking the battery sort of dead down the center line now, I find much better balance with the plane in general, and especially if you get slow when you're coming into land, or if you're doing slow speed, or you're just getting ready to set up in some in some high alpha. So anyway, so this is our, like I said before, this sort of focal price or deal extreme. If you go to our website, migsorus.com, we have a recommended parts list, and there's 4 different vendors for this type of motor, props, also places where you can buy the stuff you'll need for this motor, the bullet connectors, and they don't always come with a very good prop adapter or bullet nut adapter thing here too, so there's good spots to buy a bunch of those. Also, when I was talking about some lessons learned that I've found from using foam cure, there's some links. If you go to when you go to the parts list, if you down towards the bottom, we talk about adhesives that we like to use, and you'll find some links to some blog posts that Stefan and I wrote about our experiences with foam cure if you're looking to give it a try and experiment with it. So like I said, I've got about 20 some flights on this plane right now, and it's built entirely with foam cure, and it's holding up really well so far. Although you might have seen when I showed you down here, you know, it always happens on the maiden flight, I actually landed it about 2 feet too high, and it sort of just whack dropped, and I cracked this whole thing here down to about there. So all I did was I just took a little, you might not be able to see it, but I just took a little section of popsicle stick and epoxied that in there. So now she's nice and solid. And I think I might also put a little bit of foam cure just along here, and then smear a nice thin layer of it, because this, when it dries, like I said, it's like very slippery, like almost like epoxy, and you know, this might help it slide along the ground a little more easy, and give it less resistance when it lands. Give it a little bit more durability as well. I'll just point out here, this is a technique that I like to use after these, you know, the glue on the drywall hinges on the top here is good and dry, is I also like to put, because I've had on a few planes, is depending on the quality of your drywall tape, sometimes the little fibers, they'll get brittle and end up breaking. And you know, I've had times where I've come down on like an inch of my drywall hinge, the little fibers have broken. So on the elevons anyway, because you know, that's where, you know, if you lose your elevons, you're probably going to be doing a walk of shame, because you might lose your plane. So I found that this is just transparent duct tape that I put on the bottom on the beveled part, and it's just kind of as insurance, and doesn't add a whole lot of weight to the plane. Alright, so that's this one. I'm just going to show you some things on my... So this is my NTM prop drive plane, and it suffered a bit of a gonk fest this morning. You can see lots of battle scars here. I was coming down, you know, and sadly it's one of those things you never seem to get on video, but I was coming down out of a pretty good power dive, and I pulled out about 6 inches too low, and I whacked this nacelle, and the battery actually broke broke this whole thing out, but the plane kept flying, so it was kind of crazy. I was thinking, what is that hanging from my plane? And then I realized it was my battery. So anyway, I managed to bring it in and land it. So it's gained a little bit of weight with some glue there. You might not be able to see here, I had the foam just sort of crack. You know how sometimes with your foam you get those sort of hairline fractures as the weight transfers, or the shock transfers. So rather than, you know, pulling the two pieces apart and trying to drive glue down in between the two pieces, all I did here was, again, this is just fiberglass drywall tape. I had a crack here, and then another crack right here on the wing. That's why the push rod's out of the way there right now. So all I did was I just used that fiberglass drywall tape, took some foam cure, you know, spread a nice even thin layer there, so let that set up and dry overnight. So I'm just gonna, you can see here already, because I'm flying the NTM prop drive with this plane, and I've flown it on 4-cell, and it is just scary fast, well over 100 miles an hour. I like to have a little bit just for insurance. You maybe not necessarily need this, I'm not sure, these elevons on the MiG-35 are you know, kind of short and squat, and on the other setups with the smaller motors, never had a problem with elevon flutter without the extra reinforcement. But because I knew I was going to be punishing him pretty hard with the NTM prop drive, especially when I got brave and stuck a 4-cell in it, I just put a little section of carbon fiber there, and I also did across here. What I have found through experience with the heavier setups, all the way back to when I was flying the MiG-29 V3, is I had built those stock, and in that time the servo used to be sort of reversed, and then the push rod would come down this way and then connect on to the control surface. And what I found is if I got really aggressive in roll maneuvers, is the back here you'd get this torsional flex, and what was happening was it would flex enough so that my prop would actually hit the push rod. So you know, now on this plane and most of my other planes since then, I run all my push rods to the outside, just easier to set up and do maintenance and that sort of stuff. But this is just a chunk of, again, of 3mm carbon tube that helps you know, helps reduce that torsional flex. And this also might be a bit of overkill, but you know, I've done this on all my sort of NTM prop drive equipped planes. This is another just chunk of 3mm carbon tube in the vertical stabilizer there on the outside. I know it doesn't look like much, but if it keeps the tail on at 110, 115 miles an hour, I'm happy with that. So the thing with these short pieces here too, you know, in my experience, if you don't have, you know, I've been building planes for a while, so I've always got lots of little chunks of carbon fiber tube left over from builds, and you can also, on these short spans, I found you can use just the bamboo skewers, you know, that you get at the dollar store. That you get like 100 of them for $1 or something like that. On the shorter spans, they'll actually hold up very well, especially if you use a little bit of epoxy in there. So the epoxy can kind of soak into the to the bamboo, and then it makes it really strong. So you can get away with those. It's obviously cheaper than carbon fiber, unless you've got some stuff laying around that you can recycle into the plane. So anyway, so that's the other big difference here too. On the Desert Camel one I was showing you, I use plastic gear, nylon gear servos all around. I know that kind of goes against a lot of philosophies, but I find with the NTM prop drive equipped planes, I always use metal gear servos for my elevons, just because I've had issues with nylon gear servos not being able to hold the surface in place long enough with all the prop wash and the thrust. So I always use metal gear servos, but for my ailerons and my rudders, I still use the nylon gear servos, because 6 nylon gear servos compared to 6 metal gear servos, you save yourself about 25 grams, or getting close to an ounce. So it's a big saving in weight there, and then they work just fine. Okay, so that's it for that big bad boy, and she's gonna sit in the maintenance hangar for a while and let everything dry up. So there we go, folks. So hopefully these are some of these build, again, some of my build techniques, you don't have to use them. Just throwing them out there as food for thought. Just keep in mind some of these setup techniques that I pointed out in here for your electronics bay. To give yourself the best success when you get out there. When you're trying to get it balanced properly on the CG, and then get out there and do your first maiden flight. Just to help you out there. These will, if you get too much stuff too far forward, if you put your receiver or whatever too far forward, you're probably always going to be nose heavy. So it does make this a little bit busy, so you have to sort of plan ahead and make sure you can get, and again, you can put your receiver and your speed controller on whatever side you like. That's just the way I like to do it. But you want to keep things, just always keep in the back of your mind, you want to keep things as close to the center of gravity as possible to really maximize the capabilities of the MiG-35 and its abilities to change direction quickly and just be quick and agile and aerobatic. So there'll be links down in the comments down below this video. Check out our website, migsurus.com. We've also got a thread active on the RC Powers thread as well. Dave Powers has been very gracious with his testimonial after he flew this plane, and has allowed us to set up a thread there to help answer questions about this plane for people that are interested, or help out our customers who have already been gracious enough to buy one of the NAMC Mig-35s. So hopefully that's helped you, and again, any other questions, fire away on the thread, post on our blog on our website, or shoot us an email. Stefan and I have migsorus.com email addresses that you can find on our website, migsorus.com. So thanks very much for watching, and best of luck with your NAMC Mig-35.